Hello, everybody, and welcome. We are live. I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that, but we are live on the show, and we've got an amazing show for you today. We are talking about global mobility in a cost-conscious world. And let's face it, we have seen signs of people tightening their belt around the world. Corporates tighten their belt, and we're really going to have a look at what we can do in this cost-conscious world we're in. People coming in all over the world. I saw Ray there, I've seen Nicola, I've seen Mike Quigley, Diane Claridge coming in, Manon. People are coming in from all over the world. You know how it works, everybody. Join the conversation. Write in the comments box. Let us know who you are, what you are. Tell us what's going on in your lives. The way we all know who's here is we can find out when you write in the comments box. So please do use that comments box to let us know what you're going on. But we've got such a big show today. I won't spend a long time on the introduction because I said it's such a topical subject. And next week is pretty topical too. Next week, please make sure you put this in the diary. Next week, we're talking about the really important subject of DE&I. And we're looking at it from, we looked at it from through various lenses, but next week we're going to be looking at it through the lens of racial diversity and inclusion in global mobility. So such an important subject. I feel really honored. We've got with us next week Azebi Agomo from Equinix and Priscilla Monticello from Publicis. So two really leading global mobility professionals who are going to be on the show next week. And indeed this week we've got another leading global mobility professional on the show with us. We've got Selina Jones-May from Lumentum as we talk about global mobility in a cost-conscious world. So that's what we've got coming up next week. Now, don't forget, of course, that you can get your CPE credits. So if you want credits, if you want your credits from SHRM, from HRCI, via our good friends at Rocket Mortgage, the codes are up there. And if you want your credits from ERC, Worldwide ERC, again, from our good friends at ERC, the codes are up there, the GMS and the CRP codes. I'll leave them up there for just a few minutes more. The other thing, of course, we always like to do is to share with you the breaking news, what's been going on in our industry. So let me do that. Let me just share what this week's breaking news has been from around the wonderful world of global mobility. So what about that? Lots of news. Oh, Emily, I've just passed the enrolled agent exam. Oh, big shout out to Emily. Congratulations there. And congratulations to all the people who've started. You probably saw from there, we at Benivo, we've got a new CFO, we've got a new head of product, we've got a new head of sales. So lots of exciting things, really exciting things going on here and around the world. But we're going to move on. Now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about immigration. We always like to have our immigration segment. And as always, we have with us the wonderful Julia Onslow-Cole. So let's bring her on stage. Now, you know how it works, everybody. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's give a big welcome to Julia Onslow-Cole.
Brian.
Hey, Julia, where are you today?
I've actually just come into New York from Washington.
Okay, cool. So you've been, because last time you were on the show, you were out in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So you went to DC, and I see you met up with Julie Barron. So we had the Julia together.
Shot so nice. Yeah, it was so lovely.
And today, so you've been in DC. So I'm guessing there might be a bit of a government flavour to today's update.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, well done, Emily. That's so good. She passed her the exam. Well done. Yeah. Yes. So today I'm just going to give you a really good government strategies update. And I've got this directly from our team in Washington, who I've spent the last 3 days with. And thank you, Bo Cooper and all of the team for this information. And I think the first thing to say is that we've been saying this for the last couple of years, that it's almost impossible to get any legislative change to immigration in the US because of the split Congress. And currently we know that the Republicans have control of the House of Representatives. And if they would agree to any immigration, they would demand some pretty heavy anti-immigration measures. They're all about border security. And that would just never happen. The Democrats would not accept that. You know, the Democrats are about border policy, about Dreamers and DACA. And so we're in this kind of deadlock situation. But I just wanted to explain there's 3 reasons why it's even more of a deadlock than before. So the first is that, if anything, immigration has become even more partisan than it was before. The second is we're only 2 years out of the big election. And in this 2-year period, the Republicans will want to talk about immigration and the Democrats won't. But the third thing is, and I don't know if any of you have been following, but I think most people, have been, the election of the Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. It was the historic number of votes for him to become the Speaker. And in the course of that, he had to make huge concessions. And he made those concessions to the far right of a flank of the party. And one of the concessions was that there could be a spot vote on his leadership. So he and the leaders will be even more particular about not to sort of back legislation that might cause alarm. So in summary, very, very unlikely that there will be any legislation. There is an Eagle Act, it's called, which actually would do something for the allocation of visas and per country limits. But all the lobbyists that I spoke to in Washington, all our team think it's very unlikely. But one of the things that we've seen, and this has been a big pattern, is it doesn't really matter so much if there's not legislative change, but there can be policy changes. And Trump did that very effectively, as you will recall. And they can have really big, impacts. So one of the things that we're seeing, which everyone should note, is we're seeing a huge coordination between the agencies. So Department of Homeland Security, Department of Labor, Department of Justice, for illegal migration. And when I talk about illegal migration, I mean people coming in as business visitors and working, or companies hiring people without the right to work, or companies actually employing people who are underage. So we're seeing this really important coordination between the agencies, which we haven't really seen at this level before. And it just means that companies should be very, very aware of it. Now, I just want to end by pointing out 4 things that are on the agenda for regulatory change. And these are 4 very important things that companies should be aware of. Now, what happens is that the process for regulatory change is there's a proposal, then there's stakeholder engagement and feedback. So these are all proposals at the moment. But the first is a huge hike in government fees. So the last time government fees were raised was 2016. And the really annoying thing for employers is that the government, the USCIS, is self-funding. And what it's saying is, we need this huge hike in fees because of the asylum backlog, but we're not going to really improve the business service. And I think employers wouldn't mind so much if there was going to be a bit of an improvement in the service, but this is going to be quite contentious. And one part of the government fees that is very important to note is there's a proposal to raise H-1B registration fees from about $10 to over $200. And we wonder whether that's actually trying to disincentivize people for actually applying for H-1Bs. The second is a proposed new policy around adjustment of status. The third is something on prevailing wage, which, as you recall, Trump was trying to do. And the fourth thing is a focus on H-1Bs and employer-employee relationships, so looking at consultancies. So in a nutshell, we're not going to have any legislative change. We are going to have some regulatory change, and we've seen policy change, and everyone was really be following those regulatory changes, and I will keep you all updated, but they're all very important things.
Okay, so Julia, thank you so much for that. So we're going to say goodbye to you now. Where will we be seeing you next week?
Miami. I'll be in Miami next week.
Okay, a holiday, a vacation at the end of...
I wish.
Okay, so Julia, many thanks for your help. We're going to say goodbye. Everybody, you know how it works. Let's say thank you, hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. We'll say ta-ra to Julia, and we're going to bring onto stage Tally, our producer, who's got some news to share with you.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, Tally.
Yeah, good seeing Julia, and it was so nice to see her with Julia, two legends from the show. Today, our big star today is Selina. Selina May Jones is going to be our guest, but Selina is kind enough to also lead a discussion tomorrow with our Changemakers. So I already seen in the audience, I saw Nicola and I saw Mena. Both of them are Changemakers, and I'm sure we have more of the group watching us. So if any one of you didn't get an invite to tomorrow's discussion, whatever you're not gonna, the show is short, and whatever you're not gonna do today, Selina is gonna cover tomorrow in the discussion. So it's gonna be a very interesting discussion to join, and it's Changemakers only, unfortunately. So you have to be a Changemakers to join it, but do join us. It's a great group.
If you want to be a Changemaker and you're eligible, please do reach out to us. We'd love to have more people as Changemakers.
Yes. Definitely. And the second thing, which is open to almost everyone, is for corporate. And that will be the Mobility Masterclass, the Tax and Compliance Masterclass. So it's going to be a very interesting masterclass by Wes Okamura and Pankaj Bhatia, both from the advisory committee of Benivo. And you're invited to join, and I will send link to this masterclass, and you can register. And yeah, it's going to be a really cool one. And the last thing that I wanted to share is, and we mentioned it also in the news, that Benivo is hiring, and we're looking for people with global mobility experience. So if you're interested, we're looking for a head of supply chain and implementation manager. So just join us. It's a great company to work for.
And that can be based in the US or the UK, as I understand it.
The implementation manager would be in the UK, and the head of supply can be, either. Yeah.
Okay, so if anyone's looking, then do reach out. Let's move on with the show. Tally, thank you for all your help. What we're going to do now is we're going to bring on our wonderful Changemaker, Selina Jones-May. So without further ado, everybody, hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's say a big welcome to Selina Jones-May.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, how are you doing?
Really well, thank you. Lovely to be on the show. Really excited.
Great. And whereabouts are you today?
I'm in Surrey, so just about half an hour outside London.
Okay. Now, Selina, you're a bit of a legend of the industry. I know you've won the the Global Mobility Professional of the Year, the FEM's Emmas, and also the Outstanding Lifetime Achievement Award. So tell us a bit about your career. How did you get into mobility and, the companies you work for and what you're doing now?
I really started my journey in expat tax with PwC, and I was there for about a decade advising clients. And then I just fell in love with the in-house idea. So I thought I'd take my specialist skills and go into the industry. And so I kind of moved into a number of different roles: FMCG, energy, marine, and then engineering. And now I'm in the tech space. So I've just sort of moved around and thoroughly enjoyed my journey.
Okay, and you're with a company called Lumentum that, some people may have heard of, others may not. So tell us a bit about Lumentum and your program there.
Yeah, so we're a tech firm in the telecom space, and we do some really cool stuff. We're headquartered in Silicon Valley, and we are present currently in 16 countries globally. So at the moment, my role is kind of dual. So I do global mobility and then also do global benefits. So we're on a big growth trajectory right now. So helping the company to expand and, to be a best place to work. That's kind of our key strategy for the company.
Okay, and how many people do you tend to move a year? I mean, in a sort of normal year, pandemic?
Yeah, it's quite a smallish program at the moment because we're on that scaling up. So we tend to do a lot of business travelers and a lot of permanent moves. And there's then the international. So I'd say it's, within the kind of under 100, perhaps some sort of formal moves or transfers, and then it's all the kind of business trips. So I think it's going to scale up as we grow. So it's quite nice to kind of come in and turn it around and rebuild it all from scratch, really.
Okay. What made you be interested in becoming a change maker? I mean, what do you get out of the network?
Yeah, I think it's just the opportunity to network and share ideas and learn from other peers in the industry. And I really love the show, and I think it's very engaging. And I think particularly now being in the tech space myself, I know that you're very kind of formative in that space yourself. So I just think I get a lot out of it personally, and I'd like to also contribute my experience with the group too. So yeah, I'm really a big fan.
Okay, well, it's been great having you as a change maker. And of course, with all the change makers, we support a charity of their choosing, and you've chosen Permits Foundation. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so the Permits Foundation, that's the one I selected because in my career history, I've always found with accompanied assignments that there's real kind of obstacle around dual career partners. And, I've seen a number of moves where they fail because, the partner could be as qualified, if not more senior than the person we're moving. And so it's very frustrating to see that battle and try and support our employees. So I think, this is a fantastic charity. And I know Siobhan spoke very passionately about it as a board member when she joined your show a couple of weeks back. So yeah, it's one that I really do endorse, really feel that all of us should be providing our support of, given its great strategy to support these challenges that we find our people experiencing in the industry.
Okay, so we're going to move on now. We're going to be talking about global mobility in a cost-conscious world, which is the main topic for today. Now, you're going to be staying with us on this, but we're going to bring on a couple of other guests to join the show. So let me bring on to the show. We have from Benivo, we have Cara Butler and Beth Neilson. So everybody, again, hit that heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's bring on to stage to join Selina, Beth and Cara. Welcome everybody to the show. So I don't know why I'm sounding so enthusiastic. It's such a sad subject. We're talking about mobility in a cost-conscious world because that is the reality. I mean, we're seeing that all over. I mean, Selina, is that something that you've been seeing out there? I mean, I've been reading about sort of layoffs at Microsoft and Twitter and Amazon, and I don't know, it just, the list seems to go on and on at the moment of people, sort of companies, drawing their horns in. But what's been your experience, Selina?
I think you're right. I think any industry sector that's cyclical, unfortunately for me, I seem to always find them. So like marine was the same. And then I talked about the engineering with the oil and gas sector. So, this will be my third downturn to go through. And I think, it's very, very challenging for mobility programs. And, I think that we really need to be tenacious and face it head on, because actually we can bring a lot of value to the table, not just for mobility, but for the broader HR departments, spotting those opportunities for synergies. So, it's sad, but in fact, we can turn it around and be, not, as we said, seat at the table and everything. It's a great opportunity to spotlight ourselves, in the HR department.
Absolutely. You made one great point there that I just want to sort of pick up on for our younger viewers, is that you've been through 3 downturns.
Yeah.
The good news is that, yes, they happen, but we get over them and we come back and we're stronger and the industry is bigger and better. So if you're new to the industry and you are facing something like this and it's your first time facing a downturn, please reach out to some of your peers that you may know, or anybody on this show who maybe has been around slightly longer, because we've been there before and we know how this story ends. And the story ends actually quite positively, with global mobility growing and being stronger and better than ever. So let's put it all in context. But I mean, so why is it so topical? Is it just the fact there's a downturn, or is it also because we've had all the problems, if you like, the bottleneck post-pandemic that meant, to a certain, we're also trending back to normal in there?
Yeah, I think it is really, you see a lot of countries have got cost of living crisis, there's inflationary pressures. So you've got all of that in the relocation sector with the shipping and everything. So I think there's all these sort of macroeconomic factors, socio-political, factors playing out here. And then I think every company is always trying to cost optimize. So I think it's part of our journey, whether there's a downturn or not. And I think people are obviously trying to commoditize what we do, and it's expensive what we do, sending our talent around the world, quite rightly so. So I think we all kind of need to step back and, as you say, see the opportunity, because through every situation like this, I've seen an opportunity to transform the function and actually to get it sort of future-proofed in some senses. So I think it can be positive as well as hard to go through.
Yeah, I think you're completely right, Selina. We're running some sessions at the moment. As you probably know, we're doing, the Benivo team generally are doing these 10 top ways to save money. And it's such or to cost optimize. And it's such a topic for the beginning of the year. So when people are thinking about what they're going to do this year, doing it in a way that they're going to make sure that they're delivering cost optimization it just makes sense. And January is a great time to discuss that. Right.
We actually did a poll on LinkedIn. We asked the question, and I'd love to see what the audience think. We asked the question, do you think there's going to be downward pressure on global mobility costs in 2023? And we actually gave people 3 choices. They could say, yes, it's already happening. Yes, but maybe it's going to be later this year. Or no, there's no downward pressure. So out there in the audience, and we'll try and get your comments on screen as they come through. Let us know, are you experiencing in your industry, whether you are corporate side or supplier side, are you experiencing downward pressure? Yes, it's already happening, or yes, possibly later this year, or no, it's not happening. Let us know what you think, and we'll carry on with that poll in a moment when we got some responses. But Cara, when I sort of look at this, I mean, there are some very obvious things that you can do to cut cost, and maybe they're the ones we're not going to talk about today. So maybe just give us like sort of, the 20-second version of the things that maybe we don't really want to talk about, and focus on the interesting ones.
Right. So we're going to really focus on the strategies around from a really global mobility perspective, not from a corporate perspective. So we're not going to talk about corporate cost reduction strategies like hiring freezes and hiring locally and virtual or remote work. We're going to talk about and focus on what global mobility programs and those existing programs.
Absolutely. Okay, so in terms of the poll, by the way, I mean, here are the sort of the results that came through, which is quite interesting. I mean, we had an amazing 70% of respondents said that downward pressure was already happening. Another 26% said, yes, it's going to happen, but later on in the year. Only 4%, which is quite extraordinary, said that there's going to be no downward pressure on costs this year. So, I mean, I think, you know, that this is something which the whole market is expecting this year. And Alex Talbot's comment there, I do not recall their time there was not downward pressure, at least for the past 2 decades. I mean, that's fair comment, but I think there is actually something bigger going on at the moment than what's normal. So I think there is, you know, a lot of cost pressure, and, you know, and those layoffs, I talked about the layoffs in the tech sector. I mean, you know, we're also seeing something similar beginning to happen in the financial services sector too. So there is a little bit of contagion coming in. Now, when we look at it, okay, so what we're not, as Cara said, we're not going to look at just cutting headcount, because that's a corporate-wide thing. We're going to look at what we in mobility can do. And what we've done is we've broken it into 3 subsets, if you like. I'll just put them up here. 3 pillars. What we can do with the program, what we can do in terms of the relationship between the corporate and the suppliers and looking for optimization there. And lastly, what we can do in terms of the internal team itself. So those are, if you like, the 3 pillars that we can look at. But what I want to do is start off with the first one. I want to start off with policy. So maybe, actually, Beth, do you just want to kick off? Tell us a bit about that pillar of policy and some of the things you could look at there.
Yeah, before I jump into that, I want to revert back to a conversation that we were having in the green room, because Selina came up with some absolute gold, as always, with her conversation. And we were talking about how this whole conversation that we're having today and the ideas that we're having, it's so that you have some ideas in your pocket before somebody asks you to cut costs. So that if they are bringing in consultants was one of the things Selina was talking about, you might not have much notice. If you've already got some ideas of how you can cost optimize, how you can reduce costs, what you can do with your program, you're then not going to have to revert to the ideas that Cara was saying that we don't want to cover. So you don't want to have to cut costs. But my first thing that I always revert to, as you know, coming from a tax background, is cost estimates. So well, actually, before we do get on the cost estimates, I just want to pick up on that conversation and bring Selina into the conversation, because Selina, you know, what you were saying there is that, you know, these things can just happen. Somebody can walk in one day and say to you, here we are, you know, well-known management consultancy beginning with, say, Muck something or other, coming to organization, and they're going to, you know, look at ways. And tell us about the experiences that you've had. You said earlier you've lived through this a couple of times before.
Yeah, unfortunately I have.
When that happens.
Yeah, I mean, on one occasion, there was no notice, you know, just suddenly got called up and said, you know, you need to meet with these people, like, you know, literally like an army of management consultants kind of kicked the door down. And so that was quite tough. But the second one, we had more notice. But I would say, you know, even if you don't get notice, you know, like get prepared now, because if companies are trying to save costs, you'll probably get a target on your department. Like I was given a certain percentage in one case, another case I was given a dollar value. And, you know, really what you want to do is meet or exceed that, and breaking it down and have your business plan. Because if you don't have your plan, then the management consultants will probably make the plan for you, and it may not be aligned with what you perceive as the best savings. You know, it might actually impact the program negatively. So I would just say you've got to be forthright, you've got to be pragmatic, sell your business case and convince leadership that your strategy, if you believe it's the best one, you know, you try to override what the consultants are saying. And I've done that. And it's, you know, obviously you've got to be brave about it. You've got to have your facts. You've got to have, you know, everything up your sleeve ready to demonstrate why your plan is more valuable. So yeah, I'd just say get ready now, as Beth said.
Because when it happens, it can be pretty brutal. They can come.
Oh yeah, you might have 48 hours. You know,
I was going to say a week, but 48 hours. And basically, if you don't come up with the ideas, we're going to come up with the ideas for you.
Yeah, for you.
You might be one of the ideas.
And in one case, it was, we're going to call up your providers and we're going to look at the contracts and we're going to make decisions. So I was like, no, we're going to work together as a partnership, and you know, I'm going to steer the ship, thank you. So, you know, just being quite, you know, firm, but you need to have all your kind of tools in the box to enable you to do that, you know.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's start looking at some of those tools. Beth, I interrupt you. You were going to start talking about cost estimates, I believe. So
yeah, I mean,
a bit about that.
Just as Selina was saying, you need to know what your program is costing. You need to know what it's meant to cost, and before you can make any decisions. And as we know, most people, most companies do cost estimates, but they don't necessarily do cost estimates for everybody. And there's some that a cost estimate is an Excel. There's some that do it through a provider. But generally, that a decision is often made not to do cost estimates or not to redo cost estimates because they're expensive. They can be slow. They can be,
and the cost estimate can be based on
challenging or expensive. Clients know. Yeah, exactly. Or you might do them 6 months in advance of someone moving and then not redo them or not compare it against actual costs. One of the things that I'm privileged enough to talk about with the Benivo clients is, because we do them at no cost through the Benivo platform using our Vialto partners tax logic, there's no reason anymore not to do as many cost estimates as you need, and to redo them and to do them once someone's on assignment and then compare it to actual costs as well. So making sure that you've actually got the data of how much something's meant to cost it's fundamental to any of these conversations.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
So, Cara, did you want to come in on that?
No, just that you're being able to compare them to actual versus what the budgets were. That's really important, and be able to keep track of that and to automate that, you know, when you can, is a real benefit.
And I'd also add that it's also stripping out those assignments that aren't actually valuable. So, you know, in one example, in one company, I put them in for the first time, and suddenly we saw like a 45% drop in requests for assignments. So, you know, once they'd seen the cost, they were like, you know, can't afford that. And, you know, so I think it's really important to root out the ones that are actually valuable. And then also when you look at localizations as well, you know, what are these people costing? Or in a termination scenario where you're told to identify so many 100 or 1,000, you know, potential candidates for that program. You know, I once got called up. I had 5 hours to produce a list, you know, with all the expats, you know, the costs of them. We had to align that with the ratings and the talent call numbers and all of it. And we worked with talent. We had that list in 4 hours. It was kind of amazing. So, you know, but if you don't have that data, you know, how can you make those decisions? Really.
And I think it's all about communicating with the business, isn't it? Yeah. So it's just about how much did it cost us 6 months after that move has happened, but how much is it costing us in real time? If you're under cost pressure, they're under cost pressure too. So they need to know for their accruals purpose. You don't just want to land them with a tax bill 12 months after an assignment has finished that they weren't expecting. So it's all about that, having the data to communicate, to help work as a team.
Right. Okay, and we're talking about cost optimization, not cost minimization, because there is another side to the coin on this, which of course is the return on investment. And Mena's made a really great point. Let's just pull that one up. So Mena said, if you have a return on investment matrix for all your assignments, it would be easy to convince the management. In the end, it is cost versus profit, which is great. But I mean, I think the starting point has got to be, can you even actually measure cost? And it's actually a bit worrying sometimes how many people are not. Someone said their cost estimates are invaluable. So, you know, it's an important subject. But the other side of the coin, of course, is to demonstrate the value that you're getting. And I don't know, in your experience, Selina, if that's something that your organizations have looked at, demonstrating the value side as well as the cost side.
Definitely. And I think that's why it's really important to get back to the strategy of what the business wants to achieve, and then plotting that on, like, you know, one of those axes you've seen, the y-axis being the value to the company and the x value being like the value to the individual. And then you kind of work out what you're going to pay. And then in these types of scenarios where you need to then optimize cost, you can go through quite strategically and work out where are you going to save your money or maximize the return on those assignments. So yeah, it's really important to go back to the basics before you make those decisions.
Okay, I want to move on to a couple of other areas where we can look at ways of cutting out cost. And the first one, of course, is the perennial problem of exception management, and how you track and manage those cases. And Cara, in your experience, is that an area where you can make substantial, cost controls, cost optimization?
Oh, definitely. Because if you have the ability to track those exceptions, which exceptions were approved, which ones have been requested, then you can use that data to help adjust policies and processes. Because the ultimate goal doing that is being able to reduce the number of exceptions. And that in turn will reduce the administrative and actual cost to manage through those exceptions. So definitely.
Okay. And what sort of solutions might we find out there?
Some possible exceptions. Well, one that comes to mind is temporary accommodation. And when we're talking about exceptions, we're talking about any request that falls out of the natural scope of the policy or the normal scope of the policy. And one of those examples that we see quite often is temporary accommodation. So you could see either being requested by the vendor, raising it on behalf of the employee, or the employee raising it themselves. Maybe need more time within that temporary accommodation because maybe their household goods have not arrived yet. So something like that is quite frequent. And also maybe around immigration and tax, some special services that might apply to those situations as well.
And Selina, have you found some cool ways of managing exceptions that have worked?
Yes, I have. I'm not very popular for putting them in, but I have tightened up the exception approval processes or put them in if they're not there. And in one company I worked in, it was exceptions galore. When I rocked up there, literally every assignment seemed to be an exception. So I worked, because we needed to contain cost, I worked with the leadership to put in like a really rigid system where, depending on the cost, it would then escalate to the next level seniority, and it would land to the CHRO, CFO, CEO. And so there was a bit of a backlash when it got put in, but actually the exceptions reduced by 75% within, I think it was just under 3 months. So you can only imagine, the costs were really kind of contained then. And then only the legitimate ones, the ones with true business acumen, got through and got signed off. So yeah, and it was embraced in the end. But yeah, so for me, it's just about having everyone educated and having a strong business rationale and a strong sign-off process.
I think the benefit there, Selina, is not just the cost that you were saving in the actual exceptions, but I was talking to my colleague Mary the other day, and she was saying that she spent around 30% of her time when she was working for a corporate managing exceptions.
Yes.
That's that hidden cost of exceptions. It's not always just the dollar cost of extending that temporary accommodation. It's the management, it's the sign off, it's the documentation, it's the communication side of it, which can just be this massive hidden cost of the exceptions process.
Totally.
A cynic once said to me that expats are both the cleverest people on the planet and the stupidest people on the planet. They're the cleverest in that they probably know your policy better than you, and they also know what every other person on the program has done and the exceptions they've negotiated, probably because they've been having a drink with them in the bar somewhere, and they found out exactly what is there for precedent. But on the other hand, they can't actually manage to pay their own gas bill, and they've got to get you to do it for them. So, please, I hope this isn't going out publicly anywhere. It's just between the four of us, I tell you.
Brian, I think you were telling us about a way that you'd seen work, and maybe Selina, I think you were talking about from your experience as well, something that the gain share approach that had worked exceptionally well as well. So not the punitive escalation, but maybe incentivizing them with a bit of a carrot as well as a stick.
Yeah, gain sharing is a concept that you get quite often in when people design bonus things and like that. It's basically, the concept is you share the gain between the corporate and the employee. And one company, I won't say who they are publicly, but one company had an idea a while ago which worked quite nicely. Now, the background to this is that people were talking about accommodation allowances, and everybody in the room was saying that their expats used the full allowance that was available to them. And I'd asked the question, did anybody find that people didn't use the full allowance? And everybody said no, they all used the full allowance and then some. because they'll go out with the DSP. They know what their budget is. They're looking at the best property. The one they fall in love with is actually slightly over the top, and then they'll come back and argue why they need to have a better property for this reason or that reason. One person in the room said, actually, no, we find our employees typically only take about 75% or so of the full allowance. And when asked, the reason was that they had a policy that said, this is your allowance. To the extent you don't use the full allowance, we will rebate you 50% of the amount saved, and you can take it personally. So in a way, all of a sudden, the employees were spending their own money, if you like, when they were choosing where to live. And that suburb that isn't in the centre of town suddenly appeared a bit nicer than wanting to be in the sort of the richest area in town. I mean, Selina, have you come across other sort of gain sharing examples like that?
Yeah, very similar to what you've said. In one of my prior organisations, we had that very thing, and we were sending people into very pricey locations, and they were undercutting the maximum, and they were sharing it with us, and it was very well received, actually, particularly for some of the folks who didn't have family yet, and maybe they were out and about a lot, didn't need such big accommodations. And I think also we talked, Brian, in one of the prior sort of prep sessions about housing norms, about I think they're a little bit off trend. They have been, but will they be resurgence now with the current climate? Who knows? But trying to kind of keep people more on the whole concept rather than just throwing lots of extra allowances at them. So,
and for those people who don't know what a housing norm is, perhaps just to explain that.
Yeah, it's about where say if I was being sent from London to Tokyo, rather than me just being given an allowance for Tokyo to find my accommodation and rent my property out here. I would basically effectively have my kind of nominated rental value of this property withheld from my Tokyo allowance. So I only truly bridged the gap between the two values of the rent, rather than me.
So the assumption would be that you would be renting out your own property. Yeah,
absolutely.
Or if you were renting at the moment, then you wouldn't be paying the rent, and that rent would be not. So it's only incremental amount.
Yes, and I think that has been less popular. I've seen it in a prior organisation about 10 years ago, but I think it's been phasing out. But will it now come back as we try to tighten our purse strings somewhat? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see.
Okay. And what about using technology? Let's move on. I mean, obviously, Benivo is a tech company, so tech is pretty much, front of stage of everything that we think about. But what about the admin side? And maybe, Beth, you want to talk about that, how you can just make life easier by using technology to take out manual processes?
Yeah, I mean, we've already touched on cost estimates, and we've already touched on exceptions. All of these things are things that can happen through technology. So one of the biggest cost savings and biggest time savings that you can do as a company is get the right technology for you. So one of the things that we spoke about at length, Selina, when preparing for today's session was, looking at your team. So are you insourcing? Are you outsourcing? What are you doing manually? And one of the things that I was so impressed with that you were speaking about was looking at, actually, is your team doing work that other teams should be doing? Have you suddenly ended up doing stuff that actually finance should be doing, or the immigration team, or others? But within all of that, right sizing of your activities should be at the core of it. What technology is now available to you? I mean, obviously at Benivo, we support our clients doing that. Some people have internal resources, but there is so much technology available now. You should not be drafting your assignment letters manually. You should not be preparing cost estimates manually, doing expenses manually, managing exceptions or core flex manually. There is so much technology out there, and that will allow you to both scale up and, unfortunately, in these times of recession, scale down without having to hire additional resources. So it's so important to the longevity of the mobility programs, having the right technology that fits you not just now, but it's going to suit you in the future also.
And I was going to say also, though, to utilize technology to replace some of the services that you're paying a vendor to provide, such as expense management, cost estimates, reporting. All of that can be done now through technology. And for example, Benivo is providing a lot of that, all of those services through the platform at no additional charge. So being able to reduce the scope of services that you're outsourcing is a great opportunity to optimize costs.
Yeah, and on the operate model piece, I totally agree that technology is a great solution, because one of the big costs that will be on the spreadsheet when you have to review your function and your program is your own team's costs. And that whole horrible, horrendous, kind of inevitable conversation about whether you need to lose some heads. And so I think definitely to look at the FTE of your team, as a ratio of the employee population, benchmark that to not only general industry, but your own specific industry, the way you're set up. And then looking at insourcing versus outsourcing, using technology, all of these, will deliver, I'm sure, synergies and, savings. And also to Beth's point, I've looked at before in my teams, how much finance work we're doing, so, having those discussions about, well, hang on, let's shift that back to where it ought to be. Even benefits work, which is why I got involved in benefits in my last company. So there's lots of different areas where if you look at the activities analysis, you actually start to streamline and say, well, actually, there's a core, but then there's extra stuff that's been like scope creep that we need to address as well.
We've had so many shows on it recently, Brian. I mean, all of the remote work that's suddenly come into the scope of the global mobility teams. And I know you did a poll on it before about, how much has our work grown and has the workforce grown commensurately? And I think the answer is definitely no.
I think there's a really big point coming out of this, and that is that we're talking about cost optimization, and we're talking about, if you like, the sanctity of the global mobility team and keeping the team together. But if all your team is doing is effectively manual processes, which you're doing in a sort of slow way, then you will be at risk. But actually, most people I come across, what they're saying to me is they are so busy at the moment, they can't do the stuff that is really, really important because they're so busy doing the stuff that's urgent. In other words, they're firefighting day after day after day, doing the urgent stuff, that they can't do the stuff that's strategically important. And there's an old saying, I think I've used it on the show before, is that, if you find in your life you're juggling a load of balls and it's hard to keep all the balls in the air, the easy solution is put some of the balls down and just concentrate on the balls that you can juggle. So if you can use technology to take out some of the clunky admin stuff you're doing, then actually that frees up time for mobility to really add value and to take that seat at the table that we've been talking about, since forever. So I would actually see this as an opportunity, not just about cost optimization, but about value creation for the function as a whole. And don't be threatened by the fact that's going on here. Look at this as an opportunity to say, okay, now is the time to look at things, but let's look at things and turn them to the positive. And it may well be that one of the ways you move toward the positive as a function is to break out of the mold of just dealing with expats. Maybe you get within your remit other areas like business travelers, like remote work and other areas, or indeed in your case, Selina, like benefits and insurance and other areas. So it may well be that there's actually quite a lot of positivity we can take out of this as we go through.
Definitely. And also I'm thinking about shared service centres, like a lot of companies are looking at those, and combined with technology, that will bring far better efficiency. So try and lean on any larger programs in your organisation, to see. I know it's hard with mobility sometimes, but there are definitely repeatable exercises and pieces of work that can be brought into that model too.
The other thing I'll say is there's a lot of free advice out there, and I would look for that, because in some cases you deal with mobility functions and there might be a team of 40 or 50 people. In other cases it's a team of 1 or 2 people, and a lot more is then going on in the line elsewhere. So it's very differently structured. So if you're in one of those smaller teams, actually it can be quite lonely because you haven't got many people to speak to. But there are networks. Obviously, there's the Changemakers network that we run, where people are sharing. And I sort of really encourage people to join that so they can share and learn from each other. And also, I know for Benivo clients, of course, we do free consulting services as well. So we can give you that consulting service and benchmarking services. And I'm sure there's going to be other areas as well for people looking at. But do look out at it and look out, whether you do it informally or formally, but team up with other people around the industry to get ideas. And like everything, I mean, we're great believers at Benivo of crowdsourcing wisdom. and this is similar. Let's crowdsource some wisdom about things that we can do. What about, there's other areas. What about compliance? I mean, compliance can be a big cost, whether it's immigration compliance, tax compliance, legal compliance. How do you manage those sorts of costs?
So I think it's really around, keeping a good handle on what your contracts are saying, and, are those fees actually, the right fees, and, really scrutinizing the scope of what they're delivering for you. And then I think we might touch on it later, but it's around managing those costs in terms of avoiding penalties, so making sure your people are filing their returns on time. And if they don't, and it's their fault, then pursuing that. One of the other ones I walked into at one company is we hadn't claimed back any of the tax equalisation balances for a number of years. And we were talking about a few £1 million worth. So, actually making sure we claim back any refunds that are due, A, from the authorities, or B, under the tax equalisation policy. So I think it's just tapping into all of that alongside, the double tax treaty networks, and making sure we structure the assignments correctly. So I think really the tax structure, the immigration structure, the payroll stuff, all of it needs to be looked at in a different lens, to make sure the costs are contained. I mean, in one company, I had payroll errors going left, right and centre, and actually my team weren't responsible for the payroll, but we launched in and said, let's work together, because we actually saved a few 6-digit numbers just by putting in some more checks and balances and more support for that team. So, I think compliance savings should be definitely monitored and tracked for the
and it's not just about the clawbacks from refunds that you're due from the tax authorities. It's also making the decision: are you going to claw back as per the relocation allowance repayment? So most companies will have something in your assignment letter or permanent transfer letters that said, if you leave the company within 24 months, we're going to reclaim this relocation allowance, a percentage of it. Now, without technology, how are you going to know who's going to leave, who's leaving the company, or if they're planning to leave the company? So getting notified that somebody's left the company after 12 months and that you're therefore can spring into action and get that money clawed back can be a huge saving for the company. And you've got to think about whether you want to implement that, but it's money there sitting on the table if you want to do so.
Yeah, I think combined with that is also the education of stakeholders and also the employee, because if you don't educate them about what they're signing and what they're doing, then when it comes to those difficult situations, then you find you've got a dispute on your hands. So to your point, that as long as it's very clear and articulated and they've signed knowingly, then you can go and pursue that money. So it all goes back to the quality, and the technology helps with that, right, as well. So
and it's the same with doing. I think we spoke about before the tax. Was there a foreign tax credit the year after someone's moved that really should be coming back to the company? And that's where your relationship with your vendors comes in. It's so important that you're being given the right information, that you're tracking the right information, that it's flowing appropriately, so you can help the company to make those claims and again educate and get it back.
And actually, you mentioned vendors. Let's get on to that, because that's the other sort of pillar, if you like, here. We've talked about the internal program stuff. There's also the relationship with the vendors, because, I think inevitably someone is going to be saying somewhere along the line, is there anything we can do on the contract with the vendors? And that's quite a hard discussion to have. And let's face it, I'm going to put this right up here right now, is, if you're having a hard time, let's not forget your suppliers are having a hard time too. And it is a partnership. So, I mean, Selina, from your experience, is that an area that gets put under the microscope, and how do we sort of prepare ourselves for that conversation that might be happening internally?
Yeah, I would say it's big time on the microscope. It's probably one of the number one things that people are mindful of, because it's far more tangible. They can get a report run on all the invoices that have been settled. So it's definitely the first thing to be tackled. And I think for me, it's about having that open dialogue, being respectful that the supplier also is under pressure. Things I've done before are looking at the scope, seeing if we can narrow the scope, take more in-house, or just don't do something if it's got low impact or low employee impact. And then be multi-year deals. So saying, look, let's extend and let's get a better deal. Or if it's a big project, volumes, get a discount for volumes. And consolidation. So I've always saved a lot of money just by consolidating my suppliers. So, you know, where you've got more of a decentralized program, bringing everything together under one roof, save a fortune by basically doing almost nothing at all, because you can still keep the policies as they are. And, you know, so there's loads to look at with this, you know.
And also speak to the rest of your company. Is there a supplier that your corporate tax team are using that you can also use for mobility? One of our Changemakers shared that they'd managed to get their rates reduced by 25% because it was then part of such a bigger deal when they both went with the same tax provider for corporate and for global mobility. Now, that's not going to work for everybody. And you obviously you want to make sure that your vendor isn't cutting costs when they deliver to you because you've got a discount. But having those discussions with your wider corporate can lead to really positive results for you.
Okay, and I know one company that we were doing work with. They changed their operating model from giving cash allowances to cash advances. I don't know, Beth, if you're sort of a bit about that concept of saying that actually maybe the allowances we gave, so the allowance gets skinned down a bit and converted into an advance that is actually repayable.
I mean, right sizing allowances, it just makes sense across the board. And as Selina was saying earlier, there's some moves that are not in the best interest of the business, but it's what's necessary for the employee to be happy. And in those situations, they just need access to cash now. They don't necessarily need the cash injection long term. So something like the Benivo Pay Later solution, where you get a cash advance and then pay it back, actually is a really good solution for those self-initiated moves. As Selina said, you can also share the burden, but it's all about, and I think someone put in the comments earlier, it's about communicating with your company about the value of that move. So what does your company need in order for your company to get the best out of your employees? Where do they need people? And facilitating that in the most appropriate way. But yeah, that's the comment brilliantly.
Okay, so here's the comment from Susie. She says, surely the work/point of global mobility teams should flow from the respective company ethos as regards expats, etc. Fundamentally, why do they want a program? What is the goal? If that core perspective is established, the role and profile the mobility team should follow. What I want to do now is I want to start pulling it together as I sort of keep an eye on the clock here. And what would we say are the key takeaways and next steps? Beth, do you want to kick off on that? What do you think the takeaways are from today, and how do we take that forward?
So yeah, I'm just going to restate. I think it's the importance of the communication in your corporate culture. So making sure that whatever your mobility team are delivering and focusing on is for the benefit and in line with what your company want you to deliver. And as you said, sort of getting that support from your internal teams. What do you reckon, Cara?
And I was also going to say, just in getting support from your partners. Look to them to provide advice and to help implement some of the strategies and cost optimization plans. At Benivo, I know, Brian, you mentioned earlier that we have a client advisory role here, Russ, and he really works with our clients. He's a resource to help them design some of these strategies and these policies to put these in place. So, use your resources for sure.
Absolutely. I'm just going to bring Tally and Julia into the stream. So there's Tally and Julia. So as we come towards the end of our 60 minutes, so Annabelle, amazing session. This could be a multi-session. Thank you. We will get back to this session, I'm sure. But also there are events going on. So Tally, just remind people of the other events that are going on.
Yes. So tomorrow we're going to have the discussion, the Changemakers discussion with Selina. We just got a request from someone to join the Changemakers. So I'll see if I can invite her to join our session tomorrow too. And if you're interested, just really contact us. And we do have the cost saving sessions, which Beth also mentioned. So do sign into these. And of course, the master classes, everything is in the comments. So just join us. And on the Benivo page, always there.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. It's been a fascinating discussion. We've just scratched the surface of this, but I would urge people that if you are finding yourself in that sort of situation, then do please reach out to friends, colleagues in the industry. Don't try and sort it out on your own, because everybody can working together. We can achieve so much more than if we work individually. That's us for the week. We will be back next week with racial diversity and inclusion in global mobility with the wonderful Azibia Agoma and Priscilla Monticello. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you all next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.